81,000 tons of solid stone, the mass of 18 naval destroyers, compressed into a single hollow pillar and balanced on wet mud. The official ledger claims this was built flawlessly in the 19th century. It is a perfect story of American engineering and a complete logistical impossibility. Today, we audit the Washington Monument. First, the lethal geology that required an impossible subterranean rescue. Next, the biological paradox of pouring thousands of tons of concrete by hand. Finally, a catastrophic thermodynamic anomaly proving their steam engine could never match the speed of their paperwork. You are watching Titan Metrics. The file is unlocked.
A proper structural investigator always begins at the bottom. The foundation of any megastructure dictates its ultimate physical limits. In our case, we begin in the mud of the Potomac River Basin. In 1848, architect Robert Mills designed a monolithic tower that would eventually weigh over 162 million pounds. Let us run the basic geotechnical mathematics. To support an 81,000-ton point load, the bedrock beneath it must possess a colossal bearing capacity. You need solid, unbroken granite or gneiss. But Robert Mills did not dig to solid bedrock. He began construction on a mixture of soft, wet alluvial clay, fine sand, and highly compressible gravel. Let us open the engineering blueprints of the era. Mills' original foundation was composed of blue gneiss rock rubble. When you calculate the dead weight of the proposed monument against the square footage of that original foundation, it generates a downward pressure of nearly 10 tons per square foot. Here is where the official narrative physically breaks down. The alluvial clay of Washington, D.C., heavily saturated by the nearby river, is physically capable of supporting a maximum of 5 tons per square foot before experiencing catastrophic shear failure. We are talking about macroscopic weight, but the real catastrophe was hiding at the microscopic level. In soil mechanics, when immense pressure is applied to wet clay, the water trapped between the microscopic clay particles is violently squeezed. If the pressure exceeds the limit of the soil, the water cannot escape fast enough. The soil suddenly loses all bearing capacity and behaves exactly like a liquid. This is known as undrained shear failure. The mathematics were a death sentence before the very first block of marble was ever laid.
By 1854, construction abruptly stopped at a height of 152 feet. The official history blames a lack of funding and political sabotage by the Know-Nothing Party. That is a very convenient, highly publicized political cover story. The classified engineering reality was much darker. The unfinished stump of the monument already weighed 37,000 tons, and it was sinking. But it was not sinking evenly. Due to the varying density of the riverbed clay, one side was compressing faster than the other. The 152-foot marble stump was leaning. Its geometric center of gravity was actively shifting out of vertical alignment. Under any historical or modern safety protocol, a leaning marble pillar of that mass is a kinetic bomb. Masonry has immense compressive strength, but zero tensile strength. It cannot bend. Once the center of gravity crosses the geometric tipping point, the lateral forces will instantly shatter the mortar joints. 37,000 tons of rock will violently tear itself apart and behave like a liquid avalanche of stone. It required immediate, controlled demolition. But destroying the most prominent national symbol in the capital city would be an unforgivable political humiliation. And so the United States Army Corps of Engineers made a decision that violated every instinct of mechanical self-preservation.
If the geological design contradicts logic, the official excavation timeline entirely contradicts biology and chemistry. Let us audit the raw underpinning process. In 1876, Congress officially appropriated funds to rescue the doomed project. But actual underpinning operations did not begin until 1878, when Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Lincoln Casey assumed command. This 2-year delay is a critical detail. It drastically compresses the timeline they had to execute the rescue. His plan was to dig narrow tunnels directly beneath the existing, failing rubble foundation, remove the wet clay, and pour a massive concrete slab to expand the footprint. He intended to widen the base from 80 feet to 126 feet, effectively spreading the mass to lower the ground pressure to a safe 3 tons per square foot. Stop and audit the physical reality of that claim.
Ask yourself, would you stand in a 4-foot, unventilated subterranean trench with 74 million pounds of cracking, shifting marble suspended directly over your skull, supported only by temporary wooden shoring?
One wrong move with a shovel, one section dug slightly too wide, and the unequal weight distribution instantly causes asymmetric shear failure. The tower splits and collapses into the crater. But the ultimate logistical bottleneck is not just the danger, it is the biological limit of the human workforce and the chemical curing time of 19th century cement. The new concrete underpinning comprised over 250,000 cubic feet of material. A single cubic yard of wet concrete weighs roughly 4,000 pounds. In the 1870s, there were no diesel-powered rotary cement mixers. The sheer volume of concrete required to pour an underpinning of that catastrophic scale was mixed entirely by hand. Men with shovels turning heavy aggregate, sand, and water, and then physically wheeling it into the cramped trenches.
If we take the tightly compressed completion dates from Lieutenant Colonel Casey's logs and divide them by the maximum physiological output of a human laborer, the mathematical ledger completely collapses. To meet this paper alibi, the workers would have had to excavate thousands of tons of heavy clay, haul it out, mix tens of thousands of tons of concrete, and pour it continuously. But you cannot simply pour concrete infinitely. You must wait for it to cure. And here we encounter a chemical paradox. Portland cement cures through an exothermic reaction. It generates massive amounts of heat as the molecular bonds form. Pouring massive volumes of fast-curing concrete in enclosed, unventilated subterranean trenches creates a thermal oven. The ambient temperature in the tunnels would skyrocket. The combination of carbon dioxide from their breath, the intense heat of the exothermic reaction, and the physical exertion required to turn 4,000-pound batches of wet concrete by hand would trigger rapid biological failure. Workers would collapse from heat stroke and asphyxiation within hours. Yet, to meet the official timeline, this process had to occur at a relentless, unbroken pace. Furthermore, the official ledgers record not a single catastrophic collapse, not a single documented stress fracture in the main shaft, while 70% of the earth beneath it was systematically removed. It is the perfect engineering crime, a sterile, flawless paper trail designed to completely mask a logistical nightmare. They allegedly solved the weight problem on paper. But physics does not forgive metaphors. And if the foundation was a biological lie, the vertical logistics were an absolute thermodynamic impossibility.
The most damning evidence isn't buried in the dirt. It is written in the consumption rates of coal and the tensile limits of iron. Once the foundation was stabilized, Lieutenant Colonel Casey faced the true nightmare of vertical logistics. He had to hoist an additional 44,000 tons of marble to a final height of 555 feet, and he had to do it before the congressional funding ran out again. To achieve this, an internal iron scaffolding framework was installed inside the hollow shaft. At the heart of this iron skeleton was an elevation system powered by a single Otis Brothers steam engine. Let us run the basic thermodynamics of pressurized steam. The official construction logs from 1880 to 1884 are filled with record-breaking stone placement. We know the exact weight of these marble blocks, averaging 6 tons each. To maintain the documented speed of the tower's vertical growth, this single Otis steam elevator had to operate in a relentless, continuous loop. Attach a 6-ton block, hoist it up hundreds of feet, drop the iron cage back down, and immediately attach the next massive load. But steam boilers of that era did not have unlimited instantaneous torque. Lifting 12,000 pounds of dead weight directly against gravity requires a massive expenditure of pressurized steam. A steam engine translates the thermal energy of burning coal into the kinetic energy of a moving piston. After a heavy, continuous vertical lift lasting several minutes, the steam pressure inside the boiler drops precipitously. The machine loses torque. You must wait for the coal fire to heat the replacement water and regenerate the necessary pounds per square inch of steam pressure before you can safely lift the next maximum load. You cannot cheat the thermal expansion of water. It is a non-negotiable law of thermodynamics.
If the elevator moved at the continuous, rapid cycle speed required to match the daily masonry progress reports, the engine would stall. If the engineers tried to bypass this natural thermal recovery time by constantly overstoking the fire and violently overpressurizing the boiler, they would push the wrought iron plates of the boiler past their yield strength. The boiler would have violently detonated inside the shaft, acting like a shrapnel grenade. But the steam pressure is only half of the mechanical paradox. We must audit the tensile limits of the cables. When an elevator violently jerks a 6-ton block off the ground, the effective weight on the cable momentarily doubles due to kinetic acceleration forces. This creates microscopic stress fractures in the crystalline structure of the iron wires. If the elevator was being run at the frantic, unbroken pace required by the official timeline, the sheer accumulation of kinetic shock and molecular fatigue would have snapped the primary hoisting cables like brittle thread, sending the cage plummeting to the base. The United States Army Corps of Engineers claimed they were laying stone faster than their single primitive steam machine could physically deliver it. They broke the laws of time, space, thermodynamics, and material science on paper simply to prove to Congress that they were staying exactly on schedule. The continuous vertical velocity recorded in their ledgers is a mathematical fiction. But every systemic cover-up requires a spectacular distraction.
A magician's sleight of hand relies on directing your attention to something bright and unexpected, so you do not notice the mechanics of the trick happening in the shadows. For the Washington Monument, that ultimate psychological distraction was placed at the very top. On December 6, 1884, the final marble capstone was set. But crowning this 81,000-ton mountain of rock is a tiny, perfectly geometric pyramid weighing exactly 100 ounces. And it is not made of gold. It is not made of silver or platinum. It is made of aluminum. Today, aluminum is ubiquitous industrial trash. We crush it under our boots. But we must conduct this audit in the strict technological reality of 1884. Before the invention of the electrolytic smelting process, aluminum was incredibly difficult to extract. It was an exotic, laboratory-grade metal. On the global market, it was priced equal to, or sometimes higher than, pure silver. The selection of this exotic metal was sold to the American public as an absolute technological triumph. Officially, it was chosen for a specific physical property. It would serve as the ultimate lightning rod, protecting the soft marble from atmospheric electrical discharge. But installing a highly conductive, exotic metallic spike at the apex of the tallest structure in the world, without a massive, modern grounding matrix, created a lethal electrostatic trap. They profoundly underestimated the atmospheric physics of a 555-foot ungrounded capacitor. Within the first 6 months of completion, the aluminum apex suffered brutal, repeated lightning strikes. The sheer voltage overwhelmed the primitive connections. The electrical current had nowhere to effectively dissipate. It began rapidly heating the exotic metal to its melting point. The strikes violently cracked the engraved marble capstone directly beneath the pyramid.
The engineers had designed a megastructure that actively attracted lightning, but possessed no safe mechanism to disperse the kinetic energy. In an absolute panic, realizing their crowning achievement was actively destroying the top of the monument, the engineers had to undertake a massive, secret retrofitting operation. They constructed a crude Faraday cage of gold-plated copper spikes surrounding the aluminum pyramid, running much thicker copper bands all the way down the monument to properly ground the monolith. But the psychological operation of the capstone was already a complete success. The blinding shine of a precious, laboratory-grade aluminum pyramid completely captivated the press and the public. And because everyone was staring directly at the shiny tip of the spear, nobody thought to ask how the impossible logistical math beneath it was actually executed.
History asks us to accept the sanitized ledger. The textbooks demand we believe the neat, perfectly formatted construction timelines, but physics does not accept propaganda. When the official timeline is mathematically impossible, we must look at the structural reality left behind. If the underpinning timeline brutally violates the physiological limits of human manual labor and the exothermic curing times of cement, if the vertical logistics violate the non-negotiable laws of thermodynamics, steam pressure recovery, and iron molecular fatigue, and if the crowning technological achievement required emergency, undocumented retrofitting, we are left with only one mechanically sound conclusion: the paper trail paradox. The Washington Monument stands. That is a physical, undeniable fact. But the official documentation of its construction is a calculated mathematical fabrication. To satisfy a furious Congress, to ensure the continuous flow of taxpayer funding, and to mask horrifying delays, near collapses, and fatal miscalculations, the Army Corps of Engineers maintained a fictitious ledger. The flawless, sterile reports hide a massive, undocumented shadow operation. To physically achieve what the monument required, there had to be an entirely unrecorded logistical network. There had to be backup machinery, hidden steam engines operating off the books, and massive secondary coal supply chains traversing the city in the dead of night. And most darkly, there were likely hundreds of ghost laborers whose extreme exhaustion, severe injuries, and deaths in the suffocating concrete trenches were simply erased from the archives. Erased to maintain the pristine illusion of a perfect, bloodless American engineering victory. They successfully built the tallest stone tower in human history, but they lied about how they did it. The paperwork is a Victorian masterpiece of fiction, and a forensic audit of the math proves that perfect construction reports do not exist. There are only well-hidden secrets buried under 81,000 tons of marble. But if you think forging the logistics and thermodynamics of solid stone was the ultimate defiance of physics, you haven't looked at the iron heart of Paris. Just 5 years after the Washington Monument was capped, a French syndicate claimed to execute a completely different kind of structural impossibility. They claimed to build a 7,300-ton spire of open lattice iron, and they supposedly riveted it together high in the sky, completely ignoring the catastrophic laws of wind shear, aggressive thermal expansion, and the absolute limits of Victorian metallurgy. The forensic audit of the Eiffel Tower fraud and its thermodynamic anomalies is opening on your screen right now. The ledger remains open.